think it's interesting to see that both Jan Blachowicz and Charles Oliveira managed to become champions within their organizations, within their weight classes. Now, it's actually interesting to see this, because if you asked them 2 years ago if Charles Oliveira and Jan Blachowicz would have became champions, they probably would have been laughed out the room. There's no way a lot of people would have put money on Jan Blachowicz and Charles Oliveira becoming world champions. Both of them were seen as kind of like dark horse fighters that were never supposed to get to the position that they got to. So in my opinion, who would have won that particular fight? No one would have said that Jan Blachowicz and Charles Oliveira at that time would have become world champions, but they did. And I just find it interesting that this is the adverse nature of the sport. I mean, even if you look at a fighter like Francis Ngannou was in a bit of a tear, but the fighter that he lost to was Stipe Miocic. Who would have bet that Francis Ngannou would have beat Stipe Miocic? Obviously, the betting gods had Francis Ngannou winning, but the only reason why is because Stipe Miocic is quite underrated, and on top of that, if you look at it from the perspective of Francis Ngannou was just a lot more marketable. But if you ask any hardcore MMA fans, a few people might have had Francis Ngannou winning, but a lot of people had Stipe winning. And it's the same with the sport. You just can't count anyone out. If you look at both of them, Jan Blachowicz has like 8 losses on his record, and I think Charles Oliveira has like 8 or 9 losses on his record. So between them, they've got like almost like 20 losses between them, and despite that, they still became champions. And I think that's incredible. If you take it into account, it shows that you can never ever count anyone out in a sport as dynamic as mixed martial arts. Any fighter could become a great fighter. If you saw Charles Oliveira at featherweight losing to Cub Swanson and losing to all these other fighters, would you have ever predicted that he would have went up to lightweight and managed to win a world title? Even at lightweight, he was seen as a bit of a dark horse in the division. His only real high profile win was against Kevin Lee. Now if you look at Jan Blachowicz, he actually lost to Corey Anderson, and then on top of that, he's lost several times. I think he lost to Thiago Santos as well. Who would have predicted that he would have become champion? I mean, nobody would have predicted it 2 years ago. If you would have predicted that both of them would have become champions, you probably would have been again laughed out the room. So in my opinion, you can never ever count anyone out in this sport. You just can't do that, because you're never sure who's going to become the dominant fighter. It could be anyone. Just based on resume alone, it's hard to predict who's going to be the man. And the thing about it is, Jan Blachowicz and Charles Oliveira, both of them are veterans. I think Charles Oliveira has been in the UFC for the past decade, so for him to become world champion, it is something that he had to earn. It was not given to him. It's not like he was like the most marketable fighter. If anything, even during his fight with Michael Chandler, the fighter that they were pushing to become the man was Michael Chandler. Like Tony Ferguson said, he had Dana White privilege. Well, if you look at Charles Oliveira was a fighter that wasn't really being pushed, was he? So in my opinion, and on top of that, Charles Oliveira was a dark horse in this division. He was never someone that anyone actually looked at and thought, wow man, he was definitely going to become champion. I mean, a lot of times you look at fighters and you think, oh, there's no way this guy's going to become champion, and then all of a sudden he does it. It just shows that you can never write anyone off in this sport. You can never be sure who's going to be the man, who's going to become the most successful person in the sport. So because of these reasons, it's just great for the sport that you can never ever find out who's going to be the dude. Because from that perspective, if we're going purely by narrative, the UFC pushed Ronda Rousey, the UFC pushed Conor McGregor. If we went by the UFC script, then right now Ronda Rousey would be an undefeated fighter with 20-0. She would have beaten Amanda Nunes, Holly Holmes, but obviously that's not what happened, and that's what I love about fighting, the unpredictable nature of it. You can never predict who's going to be the man at the end. You just can't predict it. You can never predict who's going to actually make it. the fighter that you think is going to make it might get beat by the fighter who's the underdog, like it happened with Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey. Or the fighter that you think is going to lose could be the fight that somehow wins, like we saw with Jan Blachowicz when he fought Corey Anderson. You can never be sure who's going to be the man. So because of that reason, you could understand why I love mixed martial arts and boxing in general. Is the element that you never know who's going to come out on top, who's going to be the man, who's going to be the dude that somehow dominates and becomes the greatest. You can never put your eggs in one basket and say he's going to be the one that does it, or he's going to be the one that does it. Both Charles Oliveira and Jan Blachowicz, especially Jan Blachowicz, who had a loss in his career, in his first fight as well. And I think Amanda Nunes is another fighter who's had a loss in her career as well. It's just crazy to me that at any moment you can never be sure who's going to win, who's going to be the one to actually take over. So because of that reason, it's just fun to actually find out. It's fun to see who actually steps up and becomes and fulfills their potential and becomes what they're supposed to be. Both Jan Blachowicz and Charles Oliveira were never the fighters that the UFC were pushing to become the man. It's not like they were Conor McGregor, who had like the Irish support and was a 2-time Cage Warrior champion. These were fighters that were kind of underrated, that were dark horses in their division, black sheep. They were fighters that didn't really have like a hot shot manager, like a Abdul Ali Aziz. These were fighters that kind of had to do things on their own, and they had to somehow make it against all odds. So because of that reason, it's just fun to see these fighters come out on top and become what they're supposed to be. And it's just fun to see it happen, because a lot of times a lot of fighters never ever reach their potential, and the fighters that you think are going to reach their potential never do. I mean, many times I thought that Edson Barbosa, if you just look at him, he's chiseled out of stone. He looks absolutely ripped. He looks like a fighter that should be a world champion, but he never does become that. If you look at Kevin Lee looks like a fighter just based on his athleticism and the way he carries himself. He looks like a fighter that should be the man, but he never fulfilled his potential. If you look at Charles Oliveira does not look like he should be in the position that he's in. He does not look like a champion. Even Blachowicz, to some extent, he doesn't look like he should be the man, but somehow he is. All of these fighters are fighters that have beaten the odds and gone against the politics that's against them, and somehow still managed to become successful. So yeah, because of that, congrats to both of them, and I hope their career just keeps on going higher and higher and higher. So yeah, that's my opinion on this. Tell me your opinion, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.